Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we, a business owner and an artist, discuss the business of art and the art of business. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of Epic Made, and Ross isn't here today. He's my normal co-host, but this is the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Ben Moffitt of Gantry, Justin Alanis of Storyco, and Duncan Alney of Firebelly Marketing. We're forever grateful for supporters of our podcast, and we're always looking for more sponsors. That said, Pixel Retentive is always brought to you by the creative gurus at Epic Made. Epic Made is a team of strategists and artists who excel in visual storytelling. Our studio crafts unforgettable animations and illustrations that not only captivate your audience, but also drive tangible business results. We specialize in engaging imaginative pop culture savvy audiences with beloved clients like Nickelodeon, WWE, and Sci-Fi. Visit getepicmade.com and let's collaborate on your next creative campaign. All right, so with us today, we have Pamela Bebry and Olivia Combemale. I think I did that right. Yeah? Okay. Nailed it.
Yeah, good job.
I butchered that 5 times in a row.
We practiced that so many times.
All right. So a little bit about Pamela. Pamela is a distinguished marketing and entertainment lawyer who founded Bebry Law in 2019 with a focus on fashion, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle industries. She specializes in elevating brands through licensing, endorsements, and strategic partnerships. Her impressive roster of clients includes iconic brands, celebrities, and athletes. Pamela's career started at the Screen Actors Guild, and she significantly contributed to the growth of Authentic's brand group, ABG, helping expand its portfolio to over 50 global brands. That's pretty amazing, Pamela. Thanks for coming on the show with us.
Hey, Carl. Glad to do it.
All right. And Olivia is the founder of 331 Creative, a nimble brand marketing consultancy. Their services include brand marketing strategy and consulting, brand and celebrity partnerships, and social media strategy and management. 331 helps brands find clarity in the chaos and break down big ideas into manageable processes. All right. Here we are. Thank you both for coming. Just so the audience knows, you guys are kind of good friends, I assume. I don't know the deeper workings, but we decided to have you both on the podcast at the same time, kind of speak about today's subject a bit. Licensing versus collabs, and from both a legal perspective and a branding perspective, and give people a nice kind of dichotomy there. So I think that's going to be a really interesting bit of content here. But before we jump into that, I do like to ask our little intro question so the audience can get to know you both a little better. So we'll just keep it in the same order. We'll start with Pamela. So one I always ask everyone is, how long have you been in your industry, and what is the project you are most proud of so far?
Ooh, okay. So I've been a practicing attorney for 12 years now. Project I'm most proud of so far. There really is a very long list. Well, some of them are going to be particularly boring for the audience because they were like particularly complicated legal agreements that involved multiple different companies and dozens of contracts. And I am very proud of those and figuring them out and organizing them. But I will say one of my favorites that I've worked on is the Elvis movie. It was Baz Luhrmann produced and directed. And I worked on the original life rights deal from the Elvis Presley estate to Warner Brothers.
Oh, wow.
And being able to see that the entirety of the project come together, from the option agreement and the life rights agreement that we did originally to the project getting greenlit, and then to seeing it nominated for so many awards. I also love movies myself. So being a consumer of a product or project that I worked on, that was probably number one for me.
Oh, that's really awesome.
That's a good one.
Thanks for sharing that. All right, Olivia, how about you? How long have you been in the industry? What are you most proud of?
I've been in the industry, brand and marketing industry, for about 9 years. The favorite project one is tough.
Sure.
One of the ones that I would say I really loved working on for a number of reasons. I feel like favorite project is always like not only the people, but also like the gratification when it comes to life. Was I put together a collaboration program for Minions when I was at my last agency, where we, the objective was to help make the brand more relevant to a male millennial audience, which, for a childhood brand can come with its challenges. And we partnered with a number of streetwear hypebeast brands, and it was a huge success. And part of that was through COVID. So it was a really amazing one to kind of see through this change, like this crazy change in the world, but also bringing together like the worlds of streetwear with entertainment.
Yeah, I bet that was extra challenging, especially in the midst of COVID. COVID just made everything a little crazier, It's like, wait, what's going on? Awesome.
That's a great project, though.
I bet that was a fun project for sure. I love Minions. I happen to be a male millennial myself, so
how could you not love Minions, honestly?
Yeah, it's one of my best friends. It's like his kind of go-to persona. He collects all kinds of Minion stuff. It's ridiculous. Anyways, yeah, Minions are amazing. All right.
I feel like I need to confess that I don't really know much about the Minions.
Do you not know what a Minion is?
I mean, I know what a Minion is. I can picture them, but I've never seen any Minions content myself.
They're just like,
it just makes you smile.
Yeah, it's just slapstick, crazy physical humor at its finest, right? Like they're just like run around and bang into shit and blow things up and just like it's pretty wild.
I mean, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
It's
such a like subversive, irreverent brand within the animation space. So it's really fun to like partner them with brands that you might not think like a skate brand would be like partnered with Minions, but actually makes so much sense once you see it live.
Totally.
Well, I mean, you guys are both making me kind of want to go check it out. So kudos. Well done.
It's great for sure. So let's talk about some of that. So, I mean, like you said, you wouldn't think off the high level, just walking in the street, like, oh, we should pair Minions with a skate brand. But when you get into the weeds of it, like, I'm sure every skater that spent enough time skating feels a little bit like a Minion after they've slammed into the 20th rail today or flipped their board and smacked it into the, you know what I mean? Like, so that's all sort of like, there's a lot of physical parallels. I think that you could easily see a Minion skateboarding and just wreaking havoc on stuff, right? So like, I think that brand crossover works well there. How did you guys approach that?
With that project, we were working on behalf of Universal and Illumination Studios, and they, the way that I start any project, we start from the top down. So what's the overall brand and marketing strategy for the business or the property? And then how can we back into a partnership strategy that's connected to that, but also gets you to places that maybe the brand couldn't get on their own? So obviously, whether you're an entertainment property or you're another business, like you do what you do. And that's why, your business is successful for what it is. But if you bring that together with another business or brand that does something or talent that does something totally different or has an audience who thinks of them for something different, it's a great way to shift perception, to access new audiences, to do things together that you could never do alone. So it's always starting with, what's the goal and then how do you work with other people to get there together so that it's better for everyone.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just making sure that the business aligns everyone's goals and objectives, kind of create a win-win, right? Like that's got to be the end result. So
Exactly.
Pamela, what are some of the trip ups, or like maybe not trip ups, but what are some of the high level things when you start to see brand collabs from a legal perspective, like people protecting, like, okay, so this is still our IP and you can only use it in this instance, but if you use it this way, that's not okay. And then so like, I'm sure that gets crazy. Like I'm sure on the branding side, people like Olivia and I have all these great ideas, and then you throw it over to legal and they're like, let me ravel this.
So it's easier to kind of answer your question if I start by explaining kind of more of a traditional licensing model.
Okay.
Where a traditional licensing model, there's going to be two partners, and one is going to be the presumably well-known brand, right? So it's going to be a footwear company that it's going to be an apparel company that headwear, toys and games, tech accessories, something like that. And that company is looking to expand into a different product category. So an apparel company that doesn't make their own shoes but they want to start selling shoes under their brand name. They're going to go to a company that makes and manufactures shoes and has retailer relationships to sell those shoes. They're going to give the rights to the manufacturer to put their brand name on the shoes and sell them through retail. There will be, all sorts of bells and whistles in the agreement to make sure that where the shoes are being sold, the design of the shoes are all kind of consistent with the brand model. But in that kind of relationship, there's one brand who has the focus and who kind of has the control over what the product looks like, where the product gets sold, how it's marketed, who it's marketed to, and one company who's happy to make and manufacture the product, sell the product, make some money, and pay a little bit of a royalty back to the brand. But again, that's only, right, like in that traditional licensing model, you have one company whose brand is first and foremost. Back to the question about kind of collaborations, the unique stuff that you see there is that you have two brands that are focused and consumer facing with those projects. And so you've got two different companies, and what Olivia said, it can be really great to have two different companies tapping into each other's markets and marketing in different ways. But you also have two companies that are successful because they've done things their own way for a very long time. And you've got to find ways to kind of meld and mold existing practices together. And then, the other piece of it is there's always going to be new intellectual property created in any kind of brand collaboration, a new version of a logo, new taglines, anything like that. And so you'll often see people kind of, I don't want to say fighting, but you've got to figure out how ownership and future use of that new intellectual property is going to be handled between the two parties.
I hadn't really considered that. That's interesting. Okay. So like, for instance, you've got, let's talk about, like, I think the two biggest brands I've ever seen in terms of like with the most ridiculous level of licensing and collabs is Lego. Lego's probably number one, right? Like, you've never seen so many different brands on something that you have in Lego. I think in the digital world, it's definitely Fortnite, right? Like you have, I can think of no other space where you have like Marvel and DC in the same place on the same level in some ways in collaboration, because their brands are so vehemently against any kind of crossover, right? Like, and you see that with all sorts of different things in those spaces. So, like, let's say like Epic Games, right? Like they've got a license for these skins. Like, I imagine their legal agreement says like these are usable in perpetuity because people get those skins and they can use them forever, right? Or like,
it depends on the kind of subject matter and the product at issue in a license. So if you don't mind, I'll actually go back to the Lego example. So I've worked with Lego, and my old company, Authentic Brands Group, owns the estate of Marilyn Monroe. And so I worked with Lego on a Marilyn Monroe mosaic collaboration. That, wow. You know what, maybe that would have been one of my favorite, most proud projects. I absolutely love Legos. If you could see behind me, you would see that there's not only a Lego typewriter, but there's an Iron Man overlooking and watching me. There's Groot welcomes you when you walk into my apartment. There's arguably too many Legos decorating my apartment, but working on a project like that, you're absolutely right, where there's two brands who are incredibly brand focused, right? And like all of these brands that we're mentioning are great examples of companies, of brands who have kind of built this recognition over time with either the universe that they work in or the specific type and quality of product that they sell. And it's sometimes, to your point about the, things existing in perpetuity, I'm allowed to continue to own my Iron Man statue in perpetuity, but Lego's not necessarily allowed to sell that product in perpetuity. And I don't represent either of those brands, so I don't know the specifics of what's in those particular deals, but a standard deal structure is going to have a term limit on it. There's only a certain amount of time that the parties are going to kind of work together. And Olivia can probably speak more to this, but depending on how successful the program is, the contracts can always be renewed or re-upped or amended to kind of change things and filter them around. I've seen companies will only continue to work together, first of all, if it's a good working relationship, and if they can find ways to reinvent the program that they're working on, right? Like marketing gets stale if you're seeing the same messaging and you're seeing the same kind of brands together over and over again. Yeah, the lawyers can always, sign a renewal to, add 3 more years to the term, but there's a lot more kind of consumer facing, I think, kind of strategy that goes into that. Olivia, if I don't know.
I haven't done any of those deals in particular, but what I'll say is usually what I see in the contracts, or the way that I like the contracts to be structured from like the brand and marketing side, is there's a window basically where you can actively promote it. So that's like typically, leading up. And this I see with talent and also with brand to brand collaborations. So there's an active promotion window, and that's, typically depending on how the business is structured, let's say from like 2 months to 2 months before to, I don't know, a few months after, let's say like the release date. And then there's usually a sell-through window. So if the product hasn't sold, or if there's inventory that has to be sold off to other retailers, like that can happen and it can still be in the marketplace, but they're not promoting it on social media, sending email to their customers. It's not on the homepage of the website. And so that's why you'll see things out in the world for longer or in perpetuity, but it's not being actively promoted by those brands any longer. But it's interesting because the 2 examples that you gave are examples of brands that have insanely large and engaged audiences. So from a partnerships perspective, like the power of a Fortnite to bring in partners who are amazing and the most relevant in culture is very high, because they have access to an audience that's massive and highly engaged, which is not something that all brands have. So it's very attractive to brand partners to partner with someone like a Fortnite.
Yeah, I mean, Fortnite is just remarkable. I mean, Fortnite did something that no one said they could do, right? Creating an entire game an entire compensation profit model based on cosmetic skins, which is insane, right? Like nothing you buy in Fortnite affects gameplay whatsoever, right? So you have kids spending millions and millions of dollars of their parents' money and like allowances and whatever on like skins that they can't even they just get to use because they want to look cool. Like it's wild. And then now, I'm sure brands pay a truckload of money to be included in these things. I'm sure every deal's different, every brand's different, right? But like I used to, like whenever I see like, they were launching a new Aquaman movie, like all of a sudden Aquaman's the featured skins in Fortnite, right? Like it's part of a giant marketing campaigns where they go to these cultural relevant hotspots to promote their products in different ways and get them in front of people. I love the way that works. It's so fascinating to me. So I think what I heard you say though, that is that like all these deals are structured with time frames. Like, hey, you can promote it for this long, or you can manufacture them between this dates, or it's probably some of them are even like you can do 1 million units or 70,000 units or whatever, depending on what it is, right? Then it lives on outside of that, but the business machine that is agreed to in front of it has some parameters on it. So they, like Pamela said, they can re-up it or they can punt it or whatever, depending on how effective it is, I imagine.
If you think about it in like more of an old school context where marketing and advertising took place largely in print format, right? Like in magazine ads, if a model or an actress were hired by a brand to be in a perfume ad or an apparel ad or something like that, the fact that the relationship between the brand and the talent terminated or ended doesn't mean that all of those magazines now have to be destroyed, right? Like whoever bought them owns them, and that ad kind of exists there in perpetuity. And we've essentially kind of done the same thing in new media, right? Social media, digital marketing, whatever had been posted tends to be, well, there are some deals that are different, but tends to be allowed to remain there in the history of a brand's page or on talent's page. But it doesn't mean that you can necessarily like pay to promote or sponsor the post anymore.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that does make
it's interesting because in a lot of talent deals, you'll see like the brand should always have, they have the right to keep the images up on their social media pages, in perpetuity. although they can't actively spotlight or promote it after the term. But like oftentimes you'll see the talent will remove it from their pages after the term because they don't want to be connected to that brand anymore. So that's always a negotiation point in contracts of figuring out how long does the talent have to keep it on? Can the brand keep it on? Because unlike print, like you can easily Google something and see what the talent's done, who the brand's partnered with. And so it's this weird contrast where on the one hand, we're consuming so much. So when something happens, it's kind of one and done and like people can forget about it. But at the same time, you could always find it because it lives on the internet.
Especially for talent who have big brand ambassador businesses, right? So like if it's talent, whether it's an athlete, musician, actor, and they do kind of one-off programs or projects, that's one thing. But for talent who make a significant living, or probably more so than just making a living off of their brand partnerships, they will do, one deal with fragrance, and then they will have some sort of exclusivity period, and they will look to, when that deal ends, find a new fragrance partner. And, who else can I help sell and promote a different product, a different brand? And so they don't want the historical association with, brand A when they start working with brand B.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, especially like, if brand A and B are competitors in some fashion, right? Like, well, I'm no longer working with them, so I don't need this on here because that would be bad if I'm driving traffic here and they scroll through my feed and like, oh, well, I like this product better, and that's a competitor product. So there's a lot of things to consider there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so what are some cool collabs that you guys would like to see? Obviously, no strings attached or anything, but like, I'm just fascinated by that since you guys are kind of in the space. I think Olivia's got ideas like right on the top of her head right there.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think like what I would put out into the world that maybe I'm already working on.
Oh, that's totally fair. And if you guys can't answer that for any reason, that's okay. We can move it along.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of, I for some reason, my brain went immediately back to Legos just because I truly do love Legos so much. But I'm trying to think of what kind of Legos do I want to build? I don't know. It's very exciting. They already make Harry Potter Legos, so like, I'm set there.
It's gonna hit all the major nerd groups there. I love it.
Yeah, I know. You're welcome.
Yeah, you remember when being a nerd wasn't cool? I don't either. So.
I'm leaning into it.
I love it. It's my jam. So,
so I'll say, without thinking kind of too specifically, the collabs that I like are kind of what Olivia was talking about earlier, which is the ones that don't immediately jump out at you as being like, oh yeah, like, of course those two brands would partner together. But the ones where you have to kind of think a little bit through and you can kind of see the strategy and the intelligent planning that went into it. So I can't even really think of an example, but something that's not, it's not partnering a surf brand with a surfer, right? It's partnering a surf brand with technology of some sort,
or a restaurant.
That's a great, high-end luxury with a restaurant for some reason. But like, you can see, I mean, for me, maybe for Olivia too, being the people who work in that space and see what has to get done in order for the collab to make its way to the consumer, you can see all the work and the thought that went behind it. And it is kind of like seeing how a puzzle comes together.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, it's thinking about like the psychology behind the person that's consuming that brand. So it's like, I'm just going to roll with the surfer one. Like if you're a surf brand and obviously your customer is a surfer, what else do they like to do? Like what kind of food do they eat? Are they probably somewhat health conscious? Cause like surfing is actually really hard. And you have to stay in really good shape. Like a lot of surfers also run because you need cardio when you're out there, like in waves. So what other brands or lifestyle elements can you think of that, the surf brand doesn't offer as a core part of their business, but it would be a given to share audiences and like create product that would be super exciting to their customer? Because I think partnership objectives switch, right? Like sometimes you're trying to acquire new customers. Sometimes you're trying to maybe drive revenue, which I think is sort of a licensing sort of starts to stray more into licensing. Sometimes you just want to offer something special to your current customer because there's a lot of choice out there.
Yeah.
You have to maintain brand loyalty. So like there's so many layers to how you get to the ultimate partnership.
I love that. So that kind of helps me get a little more into this other thought. So brand loyalty, I've not seen a better tool for brand loyalty than what Web3 and metaverses and all of that have to offer to the table. Have you all seen anything cool in that space or have any ideas on that front? I know Pamela and I kind of got into, you helped me with all my Web3 contracts for my stuff, for all my NFTs. So
yeah. I mean, I think Web3 offers a very unique opportunity, or maybe not very unique, but offers a unique opportunity for brands to continue to collaborate. It's exactly kind of what we're talking about when it comes to Fortnite and their desire and their ability to bring all these other brands into their world. I think NFTs are one more way to do that, right? It's when I first started going down my own rabbit hole, and Carl, you still know far more about the space than I do, right? Like I still consider myself a beginner. To me, it's a new medium for artists, for creators, for brands, for talent to be able to kind of bring who they are, what they're selling to consumers. To be able to use an NFT as a ticket to an event for a musician or for an exhibit or something like that. I think there's a lot of different unique opportunities. There was one interesting kind of Web3 NFT collab. I thought it was interesting. It is now probably one for the history books, but a couple years ago, Coachella partnered with FTX that everybody who had a ticket to Coachella could download and create an FTX wallet, and you got a free commemorative NFT. And that NFT was a flower bud, and on the morning of the festival, it bloomed into a flower. And it was a little bit interactive. It was a way for FTX to tap into Coachella's audience and for Coachella to tap into people who are focused on, building digital portfolios. And then for Coachella, they offered different rewards. I know so much about this particular one because I went to the festival that year and I got the rare flower that bloomed and was redeemable for 2 free tickets to the following year. And so it's a way to kind of bring your customer and your kind of collab partner's customer into a kind of deeper brand loyalty, because that brought me back to Coachella the next year. That could help me, if I win a free t-shirt or if I win a free Ferris wheel ride. It creates more of a kind of individual, more immersive experience for the consumer, which is a big part of, at least what I'm seeing and what my clients are seeing when it comes to marketing campaigns. Things like activations and pop-ups are a huge way to kind of keep your customer, keep your client in the door.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I bet you can, I wonder how see, the cool thing about collectibles is when something goes awry, like FTX, those are probably worth a lot now, right? They're like a moment in history, right? It's kind of like misprints on a Pokemon card, right? The 5 Charizards that had this little misprint on them, Jake Paul's got one now on a necklace that's $100 freaking million or something crazy. So it's always interesting on the collectible side of that, and just being able to layer in all these different ways that can add value to the customer and create this permanent memorabilia of some sort for these collaborations. Not to mention, there's a lot of digital things going on now where it's this asset is tied to a real world asset, and I'm doing that with some of my stuff now too, in collaboration with an art management company where they're going to use their brand and my brand, and we're going to put physical near field communication chips on my artwork that connects to the NFT. So it's pretty cool stuff. So I've seen that.
That's the area that I think has really stuck. Because I feel like 3 years ago, you really started to see Coinbase was at ComplexCon, which is this streetwear you really were seeing this intense hunger for brands to be connected to crypto and the metaverse and NFTs. But now I feel like one of the ways that I've still seen it really sustain in fashion is authenticating products. So putting, figuring out how to put the right technology into product, especially with luxury product, to ensure authenticity. And And but I think the metaverse stuff is really interesting still. Like Aloe is another brand that you might not think of as a brand that
is it the yoga brand
playing in that space. Yeah, the yoga brand. But I heard their CMO, this was like a year and a half ago or so, actually longer, on a panel, and she was talking about a super successful metaverse activation that they did. And when you think about it, for them to offer at no cost, like meditation resources, workout classes, like that's so genius for a apparel brand to activate digitally, where like you actually don't need to physically be there at all to get the benefits of like the world of yoga.
Yeah.
Example.
Imagine like VR yoga. I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, I might need like a chin strap on my head strap. Then it was just, that'd be extra weird, but what were we going to say?
Yeah.
I know. I was just going to say that we also, about 2 years ago, we started seeing from the like trademark and brand protection perspective, we started seeing a significant amount of new filings with the United States Patent and Trademark Office for digital goods, which was companies who wanted to be able to brand product in different metaverse universes, right? So you could essentially, so maybe similar to what Fortnite is doing, you could, whatever world universe you were in, you could buy branded product. You could go to stores and buy a pair of Nike sneakers for your avatar. And filings kind of like shot up right around that time for people specifically filing for digital replications of their own products.
Yeah. I saw a Gucci Roblox collaboration. I mean, this has probably been 2 or 3 years, but for $5,000, you got this beautiful Gucci bag, and it came with an NFT that you could use in Roblox. So you could walk around in Roblox with your Gucci bag, and you can still be Gucci inside of Roblox. Hey, I heard it said best that like as our lives become more and more digital, and we got really catapulted into that in COVID when we were all, forced to stay home for the most part, people will care more and more about their digital appearance and how they come through in digital worlds, be it their profile picture on Twitter or whatever it is, and everything in between, into the games they play. And some of these games are like less games, and they're like this cozy game kind of thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this kind of genre of gaming, but it's not competitive at all. It's like farming simulators and like The Sims and stuff like that, where people just go and have experiences and do things that kind of like just, it's like their decompression time, right? Like instead of, they just sit down and they play their cozy game, right? But there's still a whole representation of your digital self in there, and choosing what that looks like, and what some of these things that you adorn yourself with say about who you are as a person, right? That becomes more and more important to people as they spend more time in those places. So more space for collaboration.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, very cool. Cool. All right, so we are coming up on the top of the hour here. I wanted to see, actually real quick, before we get to the final questions, I wanted to see if there was any kind of like high-level do's and don'ts that either one of you had for collaborations and this type of thing. So, like, what are some pitfalls? Like, don't do this. We've seen people do this. It's always terrible. Or, like, these are ways, whatever perspective you guys have there. So.
I can riff off a few quick ones. I would say don't do everything. I would say have clarity before you get into it about the overarching terms and partnership. I think I actually see more often than not people, and I think I'm a big believer in like you let things happen organically. You don't need to have a contract fully ironed out and signed, but I do think you really do need to have clarity on like who's handling what in a collaboration, what the expectation is of both sides when it comes to marketing, when it comes to financial investment, when it comes to resources that aren't tangible, because down the line, like the idea and the strategy is a huge component, but the execution and the partnership as you get really into things is what makes it work and what makes it happen. And so you need to be on the same page with your partners when you start a collaboration.
Yeah. So I'll play off of that. One I was just going to kind of say is don't throw good money after bad. Not every single partnership is going to be wildly successful. And just because something isn't necessarily going perfectly well, it doesn't mean that it needs to be fixed. Sometimes it's just, we tried and it didn't work. and that you can learn from that and move on and find other partners. But tying to what Olivia was just saying is, I actually think nope, I forgot. Completely lost my train of thought. I apologize.
It's okay.
I think it's also like knowing who you're partnering with, right? Because I think there can be things that work really well. I was like, maybe I'll bring her back. Yeah, there's things that can work really well with good faith and just being good people, and that's great. But then there's other times where you really need to have things ironed out. So it's a lot of like personal relationships and like being a human in these scenarios instead of just like robotically operating through a partnership.
Perfect. So I was going to play off of that. Is that right? Like, I'm the lawyer. I'm always going to recommend that you do have a contract ironed out, but not just for what everybody knows a contract to be, but the process of negotiating a contract will actually tell you a lot about the person that you're working with and what it's going to be like working with them in the long term, right? Like, I've had a couple of clients spend significant resources and time negotiating a contract and walk away at the 11th hour because they recognize that if this is what the other party is going to be like during the negotiation process, this is not the relationship that we want to work together. It also, having a contract and trying to iron out as many details as you can gets people talking about things that they might have forgotten to talk about when they're just excited about working together, right? Like, the right partnerships, you're able to negotiate a contract. It might be a tough negotiation. It should be if both parties have a vested interest in, protecting themselves in a successful program. But you'll, like I said, you'll learn a lot about who it is that you're looking to work with and about what works for them and what doesn't. And sometimes you'll be able to kind of spot a red flag before you really get into the relationship. So it's also another way to think about the purpose of a contract is like a test of the relationship almost.
Yeah, 100%. That makes a lot of sense.
I think also, Pamela, I'm curious, like, how often you experience or don't experience this, but I think it's so important to know where you stand too, because sometimes I love working with Pamela because sometimes I'll be like, can we cave here, please, from a legal perspective? Because like, this really isn't that important to the overall deal. And, it's always a conversation of like, what are we trying to get to and where can we let go and where do we need to hold strong? And if you don't have clarity on where you stand, it's just like, you're just going to be on a rigmarole for months negotiating.
Totally. I think that the big takeaway here is like, as with every relationship with any other person you have, great communication is the foundational part of it, right?
Yes.
Getting on the same page, understanding that when I said X, you heard X, and that X means X to both of us, right? Like, so all of that is really important. So
there's a bad lawyer joke in here. If anybody in the audience is a lawyer, he's literally having the peerless conversation, but we'll move on from there.
Okay.
It's a case you learn in contract law. It's like one of the first cases, and it's a contract was made for an exchange of goods on a ship that was coming in called Peerless. And one guy said Peerless, and the other guy said, yeah, Peerless. But it turns out there were two Peerless ships. There was Peerless 1 and Peerless 2.
Oh.
And so they thought they were talking about the same thing, but they were not, in fact, talking about the same thing. There was no meeting of the minds. When this guy said X, this guy heard X, but it was actually Y. Anyways, I told you it was a bad joke. I warned you.
Then the guy showed up and he's like, I thought there was no peer here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
See?
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get to the wrap here. It was so much fun chatting with you guys. So we're coming up on time. So I have one last question for you both. Is there anyone or anything in your career that you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, a valuable resource, favorite client, anything like that?
I'll go ahead and shout out to a mentor of mine. His name is Joe Zaro. He and I overlapped at Authentic Brands Group, and he was hired by the company. He had been a practicing lawyer for 17 years. I think it was 17, maybe 15. But he was hired by the company in a business development role. And one of the things I've kind of always prided myself on is being able to speak English to my clients, right? Like, speak human, not speaking legalese.
Yes.
I think a lot of lawyers can get caught up in focusing so heavily on the legalese, the legal concepts, and forgetting to translate that to their clients. And Joe, having been hired in a business perspective, helped me learn to balance that a little bit, right? Like I was professionally raised in-house, so I wasn't necessarily trained or surrounded by exclusively lawyers. I was trained in a large case by my client, by the people who are on the business side, by the artists, by the creatives, by the business development and sales teams. They were the ones who are getting the deals done. So a focus on like the business goals of any contract is important for any lawyer. And so Joe is probably one of the people who really helped me see the difference between kind of like heavy legalese and, you know, being a traditional lawyer who spots issues and analyzes risk, and helping get the project done in a way that meets the business goals.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
How about you, Olivia?
I mean, there's so many, I've had so many great mentors I'm so grateful for. I would say one thing that's more general that's really helped me, and something that I recommend is I've always been a big believer in like investing in your personal growth to fuel professional success. And I work with a coach who, she does personal coaching, she does business coaching, but I would say she has this great combination of like a spiritual understanding while also understanding like the importance of operations in business. Her name's Sarah, and I'm happy to share her info with anyone who's interested, but she's been such a great help and container for me as I started 331 to get very clear on how I want to show up in the business world, and to accept that it's okay for me to do things in my own way, and that, you know, that's what's going to make my business a success for me. And I think that so many people get caught up in like, how am I supposed to do things, instead of finding the ways that really work for them. And so I highly recommend working with a coach, or invest, you know, it could be therapy, it can be coach, it can be a spiritual healer, it can be any number of things that work for you, but just taking the time out of your business day to get clear on kind of like who you are and what you want, because that is very powerful in a business setting.
Absolutely. Love that. Had a couple of coaches over my years and mentors, and like, man, there's nothing that helps you get clarity better than someone who's done it before and done it wrong a few times and seeing all this, you know, and, you know, and it's the same kind of mentality as we're coming up as children, right? You just got to always have that open mind to grow and learn from people that know more than you. And that doesn't mean you're going to take it one for one. You're going to interpret it yourself and apply it to your life, but absolutely can't agree with that any more than, you know, anyway.
It's easy to get caught in our own head. Yeah. So sometimes it's important to, you know, ask people for support, just friends or people in the world, but also to have someone who's going to kind of call you on your shit and be you know, do your work here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I want to give a big thank you to Lunch Club, which is where Pamela and I first got connected. Amazing platform, free networking. If you need an invite, hit any of us up. I'm sure we all have invites. I think it's still invite only, but really cool platform. All right. So we've been talking with Pamela Bebry. Yeah. Nailed.
Yeah.
Here we go. Of Bebry Law, and Olivia Combemale of 331 Creative. Their websites are listed below, but if listeners want to follow up with you, where should they go? Either one of you.
Website's perfect. We've got a contact form and it'll come directly to us.
Okay. All right. How about you, Olivia?
Yeah, website is perfect. I think that there is an email on there.
Awesome. And if you guys want, I can include your LinkedIn profiles if that's okay as well. Cool. Awesome.
Good.
All right, Pamela and Olivia, thank you so much for being on the show. And until next time, friends, we'll see you later.
Thanks, Charles.
No. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.